All right. We are getting into a very, very deep Indian. We'll go a little slower than we did, and I want to give an introduction before every part. We learned the previous time. We're up to on page base, the second line. We learned about the ayin, how the ayin seeks to rise up and to be included in the ani, to be bottling the ani. Okay. I'd like that we should have some kind of an idea from a tangible perspective what we mean by this beetle. So we started discussing last time to understand a simple principle. If you recall, I gave you the illustration that in our world, when you want to build something, let's say you build a car, so the car seems to be to us a real tangible presence. The blueprint, the schematic, and the idea of how to build a car, and beyond that, the very essence of what is a car for. Remember that discussion? What is a car? Who invented? Where does the idea of a car come in? These are all things which are intangible. A car is a real tangible thing. So therefore, from our perspective, from a worldly perspective, it seems that the real thing is the car. These other levels are of less significance than the physical presence. The truth, however, is, and this is important for us to understand in general, and particularly to understand what we're going to encounter in the Maimer. The idea of a car, even though we're talking about a physical thing, the essential idea is something which is rooted. It was invented by human beings, The invention of that car is not just how to make a car, the invention that you can make a vehicle run on its own power. It preceded that. The real invention is the idea, the human perception that you have to be able to get around from one place to the other. A tree, lahavdil, doesn't have to get around. An animal can move around, but generally it exists within its vicinity, within its
head down.
Head down, right. A human being, as you pointed out, a human being has a completely different perception of the world. Like it says that the light, the first day the Rebbe created light. So as it says, Oyer sheniver beim reishin, the oyer that was created beim rishin the first day. Odem orishin mabit beim save oyer matzeif. Odem was able to to look and to perceive with this light from one end of the world to the other. What is the significance of this? That it's a very bright light. The significance of this is that from one end of the world to the other is something that Adam is interested in, because the whole world is his. The whole world is his domain and his duty. If you remember, we spoke about it in different contexts, but I always speak about what is the suffering of being in jail. Remember that? Were you ever privy to that discussion? A person is in jail, it's a very difficult suffering. And the question is, why? Let's say he's treated humanely. He's giving his 3 meals, he has his bed, he can take a walk around. And in some white-collar jails, he can even enjoy some sports and play tennis. What's so terrible? He's being taken care of, doesn't have to worry about anything. So, just to explain to you that it is not what people think at first glance, oh, but he can't go wherever he wants to go. That's not the point. How do I know it's not the point? Because when he's released from jail, all of a sudden he's released from jail, he's free. So what does he do? Start running around the streets and making all the turns that he wants? He doesn't. Sits down and reflects on his new situation, goes home. So it's not the whereabouts, the freedom of movement. It's much more of a delicate element. And the element is that a human being, the human soul, does not relate to the world per se. It relates to infinity. The human being lives in infinity. Like the expression, the sky is the limit. What's the sky is the limit? In terms of the human perception, really the sky is, he's seeing the entire reality, not the limited reality in which he functions. The Rebbe took us out of Mitzrayim and set us free, right? He gave us freedom, set us free. So one can ask, what kind of freedom is that? He took us out of slavery into slavery. From Egyptian slavery into godly slavery. What kind of freedom is that? He gave us a Torah, and he said, Li b'nei Yisrael avodim, you're my servants, Asher Yitzei Yisrael Mitzrayim. What does it mean he took us out from slavery into freedom?
Egyptian slavery was a preparation.
Preparation for this slavery.
Yeah.
So this slavery is even more severe.
No nation would accept the Torah if they weren't used to being slaves. I'm serious. That's what I always thought.
That's what you always thought. Okay, that's beautiful. So you didn't think he didn't put us into freedom. It doesn't say.
Obviously, Torah is just to be enjoyable. It's not like. But
maybe some even enjoyed Egyptian slavery too. Chas v'shalom to say that. Now, but this was a training ground for enslavement.
I always thought about that. I'm serious.
Okay, I hear. So this is exactly why I'm bringing up these questions, because I don't want anyone to misunderstand, because this is important. This is primarily important. God forbid to say this.
The Torah means us to connect to infinity.
In order to connect to Hashem, in order to recognize the truth of Hashem, the soul must be 100% free. If you are encumbered, if you are burdened by worldly constraints, by concerns, by perceiving your existence within the worldly borders, you can't think about God. You think about your, the daladamas that you're in. That's your reality. In order to open your mind and relate to the godly truth, which is beyond world, one has to be 100% free from the burden, from worldly burden. To think with your own mind, to think with your own soul, to think what does your intellect, what does your soul tell you, rather than what is the circumstance. What would be more advantageous? You understand? How do I secure my next breakfast? That's a freedom. This is real. The Rebbe took us out of bondage, from slavery, where we only knew the boss, the physical world, the teva, and took us out and set us into a completely different perspective. That there's a reality in the world. There's a reality higher on.
Anything would have been spectacular.
I'm here.
Anything would be much more amazing, going from one stage to another. Of being burdened and confined in that, being slavery, and all of a sudden they're just not only free physically but spiritually also.
Well, yes, yeah. It was an extremely amazing thing. They received the Torah. They had reached such a pure view of reality, of the truth, that they were able to say Nasa v'nishma. Nasa v'nishma means that the godliness is so real to them that I don't need any proofs. I don't even understand. I see it. I recognize its truth. This is the real freedom, that where the soul is really freed to see, to relate to things the way it sees things. In order to relate to God, one has to be extremely free. That's a chapter from slavery to freedom. So the highest and most powerful reality that there is godliness. And in terms on the human level, it is the human soul. So this is the pshat that a person who is in prison. What's hindering? What's bothering him? Because when he's in prison, he is constantly under the surveillance of the prison guard and the prison walls, and his mind begins to perceive that his world ends at these prison walls, instead of being unlimited, of being in God's domain. That's the big suffering for the soul. So, just using that analogy, we have to understand this scene that Adam looked at the world from one end of the world to the other was not just a physical experience, but he was able to see that far. He has such powerful eyes. This is the human domain. There's no end. This is, in fact, what we saw by our Rebbe. The Rebbe was concerned about Yidden, about people, on every continent, in every little hole, in every little enclave, little village, little island, everything was his concern.
It's enclave?
Yeah, enclave means security area, That's how people got together and created a little community. Everything. Because in fact, a human being, the Rebbe has given the world to the human being. And particularly, of course, to the Yid. Because the Jewish soul has that type of greatness. Now, of course, there are different people and different levels and so forth, but just to explain that all of these inventions that people done actually are rooted in the human soul. The car, as I spoke yesterday, the other day, car was not invented in order to facilitate car races. That's a complete abuse of that. It's a stupid usage of it. You understand? Car was invented to aid, to help a human being to fulfill his mission. So therefore, what is the most important, what is the most powerful element in this entire process of building a car? It is the human soul. This is the spirit behind it. Below that is the intellect that understands how to capture this, how to translate it in practice. And then below that is that invents the possibility of building the car. And all the way below that is the factory that builds the car. Okay? But when you're looking back from bottom up, the factory that builds the car is a yesh, is a real presence. And the human soul is an ayin. There's nothing there. It's a spiritual, it's a spirit. But that spirit is the power behind the entire process.
What's like lower than the intellect again? First is like the soul and then like intellect.
Well, I didn't go through every step.
What did you say?
The soul, intellect, then invention, and building, and it was the engineering and the mechanical thing. You can go to many different stages, but that's not important. The important thing is to understand that when we say this is ayin, this is ani, this is higher. The higher it is, the greater it is. And to us it seems the opposite. So we have to understand that this whole concept. So what we have explained over here, that there are two madrigas. There's a madriga that's called ani, and madriga that's called ayin. Ayin and ani are the same letters, but its position is in a different level. Ani is called Nehero Ilo'o, the upper light. Ayin is called Nehero Tato, the lower light. To fit these two terms into our analogy of this human being, you have the idea. I'm talking about building a car, okay? This is our perception. So while we are concerned, we are involved, let's say, in figuring out what can help the human being to get around from one end of the world to the other. Right? And we're perceiving that a human being belongs all over. He should be able to get around wherever he wants to get around. Okay? So all of these inventions and all these ideas that flow from that perception, this is the yesh. This is what's being created from that perception. That perception itself is ayin. It's a non-present. And in fact, it is rooted in a much higher level. It itself is an ayin. You perceive, you would like to get around, but what's in it? And what you're involved in is in translating it on a practical level. What can you do to make it possible? This ayin, this is the spirit behind the whole invention process. This spirit, this ayin, is rooted in a much higher level in the human being, in the human soul. And that is like the ani, the very soul itself. And as we said before, that when you put a human being in prison, you're putting him to tremendous suffering. Not because he cannot do anything, but because he cannot relate to himself. You understand? He cannot perceive his own reality. His own reality, whether he does anything with it or he doesn't do anything with it, he has an infinite reality. That's the ani, without any practical ramifications. This is called the facilitator. This is the freedom of the soul, even if you don't do anything with it. And then there is the derivative of that, the spirit of containing the whole world and going around, and then you start going down and applying it practically. So the ani, this is what's called at the higher level. This is that which is part of the soul itself. And the ayin is the oil that emanates from that, and that begins to, that tells a person what he is and what he is for. You understand, this is an analogy. But the similar inyan is Lamaila. The Rambam says, which I quote lately, right in the beginning of the Rambam says that the beginning, the first step, basis of all wisdom, is to know that there is a first being. This first being is unrelated to the world. This is an independent, a first being. It's a reality in and of itself. If you recognize that there is a first being, then when you look at the world, it makes sense that there should be a world. I don't know if I'd like you to understand what I'm trying to say over here. There are two ways that we can, so far do I have you with me? There's two ways that we can think about Hashem. One is from the world. We see a world. Where does the world come from? Somebody must have created it. There must be a creator. There, the creator is an answer to the constant question of the world. So what's the reality that we perceive? What is the basic reality? What is our first perception? The world. That's the reality. But the world poses a question, where does it come from? So we have an answer, some kind of remote, some kind of unknown entity that creates it. Okay? That does not give us any kind of closeness, any kind of relationship to the Creator. It just gives us an answer to our perplexing question where the world is coming from.
How come we always ask what is outside of us? Like, where did this come from? We never ask, where did we come from?
It's the same thing. That is a separate, it's the same, basically the same question. As far as this discussion is concerned, I want to point out something about the Rambam. I want to explain the Rambam statement. In this scenario, in this approach, that means that we as human beings are really, practically, in reality, we are aware only of the world, or of ourselves, not of God. God is like a secondary, a means to give us a logical answer to a question. We don't know what it is. We have no perception of what it is. But this is a logical thing. This is one way of talking about God. But this is not what the Rambam is talking about. Rambam is talking about a completely reverse order. That chokhmah that a person has, the chokhmah that the Rebbe gave us, the inherent wisdom that Rebbe bestowed us with, this wisdom is such that recognizes that there is a true being. There's a true being, regardless of the world. On the contrary, because there's a true being, that makes sense, that gives a little truth to the world. Otherwise, who cares about the world? It's insignificant in an entity. The first thing that our wisdom and our soul perceives, recognizes, is that there is a true being. This is what our soul tells us. Okay? When we open our eyes and we go into the physical world, we can be confused and we can have all kinds of different isms, all kinds of different pathways in life. But what does our soul tell us? That is the source of our wisdom, that there is a first being, a true being. Okay? This is the real first perception. This true being we know from our soul, independent of any experiences in the world. And this is an independent reality. In other words, it's not just something that explains the world, but it's just the reality itself. In other words, that everything that we are going to encounter in the world is real, is true, because there is a true source for it. You understand? That's the reality that we're talking about. Like we spoke yesterday, you should not steal because Anoicha Hashem Alekech. What does that mean? Because the world is real, and therefore if this belongs here and this belongs, it's real. Why is it real? Because it comes from a real source. It represents a reality, a godly reality. This is why the world has that importance. You have to watch how you treat it. This reality is called Ani. Ani means the truth, the godly truth, completely independent of anything. Unrelated, not because I know the world, I know that there is God. But God, independent by himself, the truth of God, the godly truth is so absolute that I don't need the world to prove that it's there. You understand what I'm saying? This is the truth itself. This is the Ani that we learned before, briefly over here, which is going to be, we're going to be challenged over here really deeply. But this is the Ani that we went around. This is above everything. Above Choshech, above Oir, above Toiv, above Ra. It's independent of the whole worldly scenario. Understand? From this Ani comes an Ayin. What is this Ayin? This is the Oir that emanates from that translates into a creation, into a world. This Ayin, just like in our illustration, in our analogy, even though we said before that we have the spirit that says, okay, a car would be a good idea, but it always has to go back to the Ani. So, why do you need it for? Oh, I must have it. You understand? I must have it, because how can you limit a human being? I have to be able to go be freeway or not safely. You understand the analogy here? So this is what it says that we learned, that in the Hoyrei Tato, the lower light, that which relates to the world, which already becomes the source and the illuminator for the world, that is called Ayin, and it is constantly rising up and constantly wants to reunite with its source, where it's coming from, which is the independent truth.
Is Tir the first level after Tzimtzum?
I'm sorry?
Tir. That's what you just said, the level of Tir.
I'm sorry. Level?
Nehoira
Nehoira Tato.
Where is it located in the Shtalshalus?
In the Shtalshalus is like this. There are many stages of that in the Shtalshalus. Normally when we discuss it, and we try to get a handle on it, we discuss it in terms of the four worlds, including Atzilus, and then Keser. Keser is like the Ani. Because Keser is like the independent, the superior level. But in the overall, in the broader Hishtalshalus, it goes back to before the Tzimtzum and all that. But normally we keep it within this framework of Yasir, Yitzir, and Bria, and then Atzilus, and then Ani. Yes.
So would it be equivalent to Ani and Ayin and Yesh?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So if we want to do it this way, if you want to have the so to speak, the Shtalshalus reference would be Keser, Atzilus, which is the Ayin, and then you have Bria, which is the Yesh. Okay? Okay. So, as we were saying, using the analogy of the sun, that's what the Rebbe gave us, analogy of the sun, that the Oyer HaShemesh emanates and it illuminates the whole world, This oil exists within the sun. And inside the sun, this oil is completely bottled. Why? Because it's in very close proximity to the essence of the sun. But yet, inside the sun, this oil is very powerful, even though it's bottled, it's iron. But it is very powerful because it is right closer to its very source.
Well, the sun is Ani. Sun is a motion from Ani Ayin V'yesh.
Right. The sun, in the sun itself, there are like two elements. There is it's going to come back here. There's the brightness of the sun itself as it is part of the sun, and there is the brightness of the sun as it emanates from the sun. This is like the ayin. So we'll see. Okay. So the ayin, this is like for the time being, the ayin is like the light that emanates from the sun and shines in the world. This is ayin. It loses its power. It's so to speak qualified and limited oil. This oil is constantly reverting back and relating back to the original state from which it came from, when it was part and parcel of the sun itself. So, in the physical world, this is, in a certain sense, is also true. In the physical world, there's also truth to that. And I'd like to see whether we'll get this point. I think we discussed it a long time ago. Light is an action. To bring light to something, you have to illuminate. A flashlight, you bring a light. The light that we have from the sun, even though it comes from the sun, but we do not have this sensation, this limited sensation that this light is coming from someplace. If you have a candle on the table, the candle illuminates that you should be able to see the objects on the table. It doesn't make it day, that you can universally see everything. You see what the light hits. Whereas daytime is a different experience. Daytime is not that the sun illuminates, makes you see across the street. It illuminates everything. It removes darkness and becomes light everywhere. So this is like a different kind of a light. This is like the light of the sun itself. You understand? But there is no darkness. So this light that illuminates our world in such a way where it removes darkness completely, where you don't have the sense that the light comes from someplace, it's just plain light. There's no darkness. This is a light that is always representative of the presence of the sun. This is not light per se. Light is normally something that comes from the source. This is saying that the sun is here. The sun is here, therefore everything is lit up. I don't know to what extent. I don't want to go very. We'll come back to this in it. But I just want to say that even in the physical world, there is this union where light relates back to its source. That the real power of the light is not just the fact that it hits this cup, but the fact that there is a sun behind it.
We could go deep. It's okay. We could go deep.
I'm sorry?
We could go deep.
I know, but I don't want to. I want to get into this. We'll have a chance to. I'm not here to give a speech. I'm here to learn a Maimon. Yes.
So is it like that our Amunah, like we could open the eyes of our Amunah and like see like how the sun is like how this world represents the sun?
Well, this is something which we could see with our seichel. In our Amunah is what I said before. Our Amunah is where we know that there is a first being, independent of the world. You understand?
Yeah.
That's what Amunah is.
With Seichel we could see that
And what, the sun?
I'm saying like in the muscle, it's the sun.
In a muscle we can understand with seichel. But in terms of Amunah, the Amunah, this is what we know about the Elokus. There is a real first being.
Right, so we could like tune ourselves into it. You're saying, like even here in this right now in this physical world, in the stage we're in, you could tune into it and like we could like you're saying like this is a power we have inside of us.
Well, we have to to tune into it, which I understand what you mean, is not necessarily the way to do it.
So opening our eyes.
Opening your eyes is one thing. You have to see everything through the process of Chokhmah, of Seichel.
Okay.
Okay. But Seichel is maintained, is fed, is illuminated by Amunah.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, so we're going to start from the second line from the top on Pei base. At the end of the line. Vehine kishem sheyesh bechinas ayin biyoyse kol bani. Just as there is this bechina, this element of the ayin, biyoyse kol bani, while it is still inside the ani, like the oil hashemesh bishemesh. The oil is like the ayin. The shemesh is the yesh. So in the yesh there is an ayin, biyoyse kol bani, and this ayin, as we said, while it is kol bani, while it is in part of the ani, is of enormous intensity. Power, strength of light. So just as this is true, Cain, likewise, yesh bechinas ani gam beho ayin. There is the bechina of ani in the ayin. What is this saying? And this is going to be elaborated. What this is saying is that even though the creation of the world is from ayin, and this is all a bottle. It's just a yesh, a bottle, and so forth. But really, there is an element of ani, of truth, in this creation.
Is creation in ayin or yesh?
The ayin brings about the creation. In this ayin there is the ani. There is a truth to it.
Ani is truth?
Yeah.
How does that mean truth? Isn't Ani the level of, like, the human being?
Well, here we're talking about ani. We're talking about ani of Elokus. The truth in the truth of Elokus.
Keser or Knesset?
Huh?
Keser or With me it seems
The
like.
ayin is supposed to be kesef.
No. Keser is the yesh. Keser is the yesh, the ani, which is above the ayin. There is a yesh lamato and there's yesh lamayla. There is the ani. What? Okay.
Let's go for it.
There is the ani in the ayin, and as I expressed it, I said there's a truth in this ayin. What does that mean? What does this term mean? There's a truth in the ayin. Anything that's created, the whole world, came from not being into being. If it came from not being into being, that means that this is not a must be. How do we define a lakus? A lakus is a must be. It cannot not be. That's the one explanation of Sheishes. Mitziuse me'atzmuse. His mitzius is over himself. It doesn't have to be made. This is the truth itself. There is a truth. Please understand, this is a principle that is very difficult for us to even project, particularly nowadays. We look at our world and we see in our world, where does it come from? Where does it come from? What makes this? What makes this? And what makes this? And everything is precarious. Precarious means it's a shaky presence. It's a presence that needs to be explained why it's here. Because it could be here, it could not be here. And this goes to such a great depth in our own thinking that we lose sense that there is a truth and reality in existing in the world. Everything is just temporary. Everything is just temporary. And I want to step back a little bit and discuss this also on the basis of things that we have already discussed. When Hashem created the world, He created the whole world in the first 5.5 days, right? In the middle of the 6th day, everything was done. The earth, the sun, the moon, the vegetation, the animals, everything. The second half of the Friday, this is when Adam Rishon was created. Up until that time, the world was full, complete, but for the human being. If we think of our world with everything in it, just missing the human being, without the human being, we all readily recognize, hopefully, that that world has absolutely no sense. Right? No point. Do you recognize it? There's nothing to it. When the human being came to the world, all of a sudden, the world acquired a real sense, real value. Why is the human being so significant? Because human being represents the intellect, and he, in his intellect, he is able to reveal in the world a godly presence, a truth. A reality. What's meant a reality? Teva is not a reality. Because Teva is just cause and effect. This happens, or this happens, this happens, this. Everything is just a result of something else. There's no reality in and of itself. The human being, he perceives a reality. This has to be like this. This is the truth in itself. This reality that the human being represents, as I said, this is because of his intellect. Because in his intellect he perceives this inyan that we mentioned before, that there is a first being. And therefore there is a true presence, a true source for the world. And therefore the world is really a real presence. It's not just a precarious response, reaction. One thing reacting to something else. That's a human being. So, when we say ani, this is the ani. Oir, the ayin is just a force to create. A force to create has a limited functionality. It's based on functionality. It can do this, it can do this. Okay, going back to our original model of the car. Okay, I have a car. Okay, so what now? Is the car an end in itself? Excuse me?
You gotta find some place to go.
Is the car an end in itself? It's nothing. You have to bring back the original impulse, the original instigator, the original inspiration for it. Otherwise, what is it? This is what the Rebbe says. Just as there is the ayin in the ani, there is the ani in the ayin. Ultimately, the truth means the real significance of things, follows through, and it reflects itself in the ayin. Okay? This is these two words. I mean, Mitzvah Shem. But this is the meaning of these words. Just as there is the ayin in the ani, which is this is the source of the ayin, the real intense bright light. Then there is ani. Ani means the reality itself, not just something which has a functional value. Understand the difference? Functional, it can accomplish something. Its value is based on accomplishment. It's not based on accomplishment. It's an intrinsic value. To give us a sense, a little, a touch, we should be able to relate to the concept. It is like this. Human life. Everybody understands human life is very precious. Not only precious, very dear. It is beyond human conception. We can't surmise what human life is. It is not measured by what he can accomplish in life. Like we mentioned, I'm sure recently, that if somebody, Rahman Islam, is on the less moments of his life, and Imam is struggling for every breath. That's called the goisis, the last moments of life. So you would think, hey, his life is insignificant, right? There's guys who euthanasia, save him. There's the struggle, The Torah says this is murder, and if somebody shortens his life by one breath, he is guilty of murder and he gets killed. Hapidin. So he argues in court and says, what did I do? He was totally dysfunctional. What's the answer? That this human life is beyond measure. It's a reality itself. What kind of reality? It's a godly reality. Human life represents a godly reality in the world. He's not aware of anything in the world. He's totally incapable of doing anything, but one thing he's aware of God. That's what his life represents. This awareness is with him all the time. And that is a reality. This is an unlimited, infinite reality. This is called the Ani. It's not based on functionality, what it's able to do. It's a truth in and of itself. Okay. I warn you, this is going to be a very big, a very strong struggle, and I hope we will come along with it, okay? V'zehu inyan roimemus hateva. Where do we see the ani in the world, in the eye? We see it in the element that's called the roimemus hateva. A supremacy, roimemus means a supremacy, an elevation in teva, in the world itself. Even though the world is teva. And teva, as we said before, is not a real thing, it's just cause and effect. One causes the other, and it's just a response to circumstance. But in this teva there is an element that's called the roimemus.
The teva is already yesh mi'ayin.
Yeah.
You don't get how I need this up in the ayin, but teva is
The ani in the ayin creates a teva.
so we need this up in the ayin and also through the ayin.
Yeah, in the teva, yeah, of course. The ayin creates a teva. And teva itself, you would think, hey, this is insignificant. But in this teva there is an element called roimemus hateva. There is something in the teva that represents some supremacy, some reality, some element of truth, as we are going to discuss. Bebchinas roimemus ho'in sof. Such a roimemus, such a supremacy that is reflective. What reflective means? It reflects of the roimemus ho'in sof, of the supremacy of the infinite. Despite the fact that this is teva. Teva should be all limited, right? It's a small thing. One thing creates the other. In teva, in the world, there is an element, and that roimemus are reflective of the insof, of the infinite. Roimemus hateva, roimemus insof. The supremacy of Ein Sof. Shehu bechinas ayin, which is this element of ayin, shenimtza beha ayin de malchus. Oh, shehu bechinas ani, I'm sorry. Shehu bechinas ani, shenimtza beha ayin de malchus. That is present in the ayin of malchus. Okay, we don't have much time. I want to give you a little fruit for food for thought.
Oh, I thought it was
I'm sorry.
I thought it was food for two
I'm sorry.
I thought you were thinking it was food for two
For two shot, yeah, good idea. I want to give you things to reflect. Okay, they're seeing it from Malchus. Malchus essentially is what we say ayin. What is Malchus? Malchus is the external development of things. Like you have a melech. The melech, he is what he is. He is this great person. But then there is the melucha, the malchus, that expresses itself in the spreading forth, in building a country, and building a nation, and building an army, and all kinds of different services and all that, a whole country. Now the whole country is all within Teva. Like for instance, you have a carpenter. You know what a carpenter is? Everyone knows what a carpenter is? A carpenter, what is the sense, what is the purpose of a carpenter? To build cabinets, to build tables. But the only reason that the carpenter is important is because some people can use tables. It's not an entity unto itself. It's not a must. It's a response to a need. You need tables, you need chairs, you need whatever it is. Okay, so I'm going to build it. It's not a reality in itself, a purpose in itself. You cannot say that the world was created in order to have carpenters. Right? There has to be a carpenter in existence. In order to have a carpenter, you have to create a world, so it'll be a carpenter. That doesn't make sense. Right? It's not a valid statement. And this is true regarding the entire structure, the entire development of a malchus, of a meluch. Okay. On the other hand, the melucha, the country, a valid country, and a well-developed country, represents the greatness of the king that is above it. And it is actually attesting to the glory of the king. That everything in his kingdom is done gloriously, is done beautifully. And it serves all his citizens in a proper way. This is part of the glory of the king. And therefore, a carpenter, from that perspective, is extremely important. Not in and itself on the Teva level, but from the perspective of that it represents the Melech. And the same thing is regarding everything else. We have a traffic light. Everybody knows what traffic light is. Okay, 2 minutes. So a traffic light can be viewed from 3 different angles, 3 different levels. A person who is only aware of himself, he doesn't care, he doesn't have the perspective of the big of the big country, of the big world. He's only knows one thing: I have to get there. The traffic light is a big frustration. It stops me in my tracks, and I have to wait. I wish I didn't have to wait, but I have to wait, otherwise I'm going to get a ticket. Or I'm going to get into a collision. It's worse. In other words, this whole thing is just a negative, but I have no choice, but I have to accept it. This is from the lowest level, when you only see a very superficial one dimension, so to speak, one-dimensional view. You understand the concept? Then you go a little further, a little bit more intelligence. Somebody who understands a little bit more what's going on. He understands that the traffic light is not just against me. The traffic light is also for me. Why? Because the traffic light, it coordinates the traffic. Because we are coordinating traffic, therefore we are able to accommodate traffic going in all directions. Because we can accommodate traffic going in all directions, we have so much traffic, so we can build beautiful roads. If not for that accommodation, we would be driving bicycles or horse and buggies, because we couldn't accommodate, we couldn't drive cars on gravel. Right? In other words, looking at it from a broader perspective, the reason I'm driving on a nicely paved road is because there's all that traffic. So therefore, from that perspective, I understand. Traffic light is part of that whole facilitator that makes it possible that you should have a comfortable ride. This is a second level, a more intelligent level of looking at it. Then there is a third level. The third level is a completely different perspective. It's going outside of this whole scenario. Traffic light, it's controlling traffic and all that. The traffic light represents the fact that there's a huge country and people have to go in every direction. With me and against me. And crossroads in every direction. And what does it represent to me? It represents to me the fact that there is a living country, there's a king. There's a real thing going on. This is not just one-dimensional existence. You understand? It's a multi-dimensional existence. A full country that represents a whole malchus, a whole establishment. This is called the Reimumus of Malchus, a reality. Even though it translates on Teva, on a very low level, where you could look at it, as I said, from a single dimension. But that's the Yeshes, that's the Biyah, this is when it gets created. But the real thing that it represents is a completely different perspective. This whole thing developed because there is a Melech on top. There's a Mlucha, there's a government in our situation. If not for that, this would never happen. If not for the government, that the government planned out the streets and the city, urban planning, there would be no streets. Because I would build my house here, and you would build your house over here, and he would build his house over here, and there would be no streets. Who says I have to build my house next to yours like this? I want to build it over here. You follow what I'm saying? There will be no streets, no cross traffic, no traffic lights. I'm a chayav. So there is an element, I'm using the same term now, of truth, even at this level. Okay, gentlemen? Till next time.
So this is sort of like looking at all the spheres from the perspective of the